But I think shortly after that is when the commentator said, Klopp's never gotten 3 points off to De Zerbi, and I was like, well, I still think we've got this. It's at Anfield. It's, we're getting towards the business end of things here. They'll definitely be up for it. I wasn't super concerned.
Yeah, so it feels like that came from just some sloppy Joe play at the beginning of the game. Like, I think
Yeah.
it was just like legitimately a poor display of professionalism, which is just like, what, are you watching the same game as any of us?
Yeah, yeah.
Really wild. I would be curious to see what like Brighton what the Brighton internet is saying about the referee too, because there were some yellow cards that they got that I think that they would also be pretty furious about. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to American LFC, the podcast where two American brothers talk everything Liverpool Football Club. Today we're doing a match review. We're talking the weekend. We're talking 3 points on the board. We're talking Liverpool Football Club, top of the league, beating Brighton at Anfield. Eli, my brother, fellow Liverpool fan, how are you feeling this Monday afternoon?
Honestly, I'm a little cold and wet. We had practice outside today. It was like 45 and raining, and my voice is pretty scratchy because I was yelling at JV as they scrimmaged varsity. So you'll have to forgive my sultry tones here.
Yeah, so always just just always bringing the positive vibes.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
That's all good. Okay, okay, so we played Brighton, Hove Albion at Anfield this past weekend. There was an interesting,
heard about it, yeah.
there's an interesting statistic that I was unaware of going into this game, which is that Jurgen Klopp had yet to win 3 points over De Zerbi in a Premier League match, which I found to be really interesting. But Liverpool was able to get it over the line. 3 points desperately needed to go top of the table. How did you feel about a goal in 85 seconds for Brighton Hove Albion?
I mean, honestly, if Welbeck took that shot 99 more times, I think he'd miss it 99 times.
Maybe.
So I wasn't super upset about it. I think I texted you almost immediately that we're still going to win the game.
Yeah.
You
You
so
did.
I wasn't super worried.
Yeah.
But I think shortly after that is when the commentator said, Klopp's never gotten 3 points off to De Zerbi, and I was like, well, I still think we've got this. It's at Anfield. It's, we're getting towards the business end of things here. They'll definitely be up for it. I wasn't super concerned.
Yeah, so it feels like that came from just some sloppy Joe play at the beginning of the game. I mean, admittedly, we were playing with Connor Bradley as a right back and Jarrell Kwanzaa as a right center back, which is a combination of a 21 and a 20-year-old player, both who have broken through this particular season in the back half of the season into senior football. So, look, they beat us in transition. Bradley was probably arguably too far up the pitch. They make it down the wing, spread Jarrell Kwanzaa out towards the corners, and then, the ball bounces around and Danny Welbeck hits a worldie into the upper 90, and okay, it happens.
Yeah.
But it felt like it didn't take, look, we didn't drop our heads. We knew what was going on. It didn't take long for it to feel like I think we were kind of in the game. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, for sure.
almost immediately.
Yeah.
I felt like my impression of the first half was that there were some really strong performances, and then there were some people that were utterly silent. And I think McAllister had an incredible half.
Yeah.
I think that
I mean, just like trying to think back, Indo stood out for me in the first half too. McAllister and Indo. I think what I did see, there was some moments from Soboslai, but not nearly as maybe consistent as we would like.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean,
He
obviously,
seemed like he was pretty quiet at the beginning of the game, but started to warm up. Like, he definitely became a huge threat in the second half and the later minutes of the first. But, yeah.
Yeah.
I felt like Luis
Again,
Diaz
I think
was,
like Diaz was a live wire almost the entire time, I felt like.
Yeah. It's interesting because he was who I was going to say was like, I felt like the first part of the first half, he almost didn't touch the ball at all. And I don't know if that had anything to do with Brighton's positional play, or if it just had to deal with the fact that maybe we were excited to have Mo Salah back. It felt like so much of the play was going through Mo Salah on the right-hand side that we were almost neglecting the left-hand side in the first 20, 25 minutes of the game, maybe a little bit more. But I do agree with you that the moments that we were actually starting to get the ball to Diaz, it was when he started to heat up and stretch play. And I think that really came to the front at the beginning of the second half, and certainly through the second half as well. What did you think overall about Mo Salah in the first half?
He seemed off. I think I texted you at one point where I was like, peak Mo Salah has a hat trick at this point.
Yeah.
Probably close to the 30-minute mark. I felt like Mo, at his peak, his bagged a handful of goals at that point. There were some weak shots. There were some chances that weren't taken well. I mean, he had, if I recall correctly, he had a couple that, or at least one that he just kind of hit softly right at the keeper. And I'm like,
Yeah.
Mo, full of confidence, bends that into the upper 90, and it's unsavable.
Yeah, I agree. He was like, which is, first of all, it's totally reasonable, right? Like, he's been out for like 8 weeks, right? Or something like that. Like, he hasn't like been, so he's working back into his top gear, which is, I think as Liverpool fans is really positive for us for the rest of the season, that it's going to be like, okay, hopefully he starts to heat up a little bit and gets back to the best version of himself, because that will only help us in the run-in through the end of the season. And
I mean, Mo Salah on an off day is still head and shoulders above Marcus Rashford. So
that's not too arguable. I wouldn't stand against that.
I mean, it's not exactly a hot take, but we gotta get it in on the Manchester Reds when we get a chance.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. I can't remember if it happened in the second half or late in the first half. I think it was starting to happen more in the back end of the second half, when we were really starting to dictate play and really understand how our possession could stretch Brighton, because it took us a little while to get into it. But it looked like Joe Gomez was stepping into the from the left-hand side, stepping into the box midfield position that Trent had been taking up earlier in the season, which he has been doing, but not always consistently through every game. And I think that maybe that was an internal game adjustment, whether from Klopp or whether from just the players on the field, that seemed like it helped us out. It felt like it gave us a little bit more rigidity in midfield to break their midfield press, and I think we were able to sustain possession for longer, which then ended up sort of causing them to stretch and bend and inevitably break.
Okay, forgive us for some technical difficulties there.
Hey.
Nate, you were saying that they're towards the end of the first half.
Oh, yeah, I would just be curious to see what the number of shots were for Liverpool against the number of shots that Brighton had just in the first half alone, because I at least the ones I can remember off the top of my head is like there were some moments that felt like they were as vaguely threatening from Brighton, but like besides the first moment, like there wasn't too much that I was really worried about in the first half. You know, the last 10 minutes of the second half ended up getting a little bit shaky just because they were like going for it. But in the first half, I just wasn't that too concerned, and I felt like we had so many opportunities that it felt like it could have turned into one of those days where it's just going to be like, it's just one of those days. You hit the bar, you miss it by an inch, But luckily, it didn't turn out that way. You know, we were able to figure it out. First goal comes in. I'm looking up the timeline right now. First goal comes in the 27th minute, Luis Diaz.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that's totally contradictory what I was saying, right? Of course. So obviously he scores a goal by picking up space and all that sort of stuff. Maybe it's
Well,
just early, maybe it's the first 20 minutes or something that he felt. I was like, "Where's Luis Diaz?" And then
I mean, he made a good run to be in the right place when the ball came off the Brighton defender, who like shanked his clearance. It came
yeah,
off the top of his shin, and Diaz, just like with a classic, poacher's finish, just puts it in the back of the net, I think out of
yeah,
the air.
yeah, yeah.
It was a great finish.
You know what was interesting? I watched. I noticed that in the replay that the Brighton defender who was trying to clear it that kind of botched it. There was actually a glancing header from a Brighton player right before that. So I
Oh.
think it was actually like an inch or two off where
He
the
thought it was
player
going to be.
originally thought the
Yeah.
trajectory of the ball was going to be, which is
Yeah,
tough.
that's
I mean,
tough.
it's tough.
Yeah.
But Diaz was, he was just the fastest to react by a mile. Like literally nobody else thought this was going to happen. He was there perfectly
Yeah.
situated to put it in the back of the net, which was incredible. And
He
yeah,
can see things before they happen. It's a Jedi trait.
yeah. I mean, he's been doing that for us all season. So, man, he can really, he's really been helping us out. Okay, should we get to the second half, or is there anything else you want to talk about in the
Well,
first
yeah, let's
half?
get to the second half, though. But I do have to say, like, in the interest of transparency, is I had to leave for an extended family lunch, so I didn't get to see the second half. So this one's on you.
I was able to watch the second half, and I'm going through the events again just to quickly remind myself. And the first thing that I'll notice is yellow card Danny Welbeck, yellow card Virgil van Dijk, yellow card Joe Gomez. Like, we got to talk about the refereeing of this game.
Do we want to do that now? Is this the time?
I mean,
to do
it's
that?
starting. It's starting to look the first it was wild in the first half, and there were like really questionable calls. McAllister got the softest yellow card in the history of yellow
Yeah,
cards.
that was bad. I couldn't believe that was a yellow card.
It was
I
absolutely.
didn't think it
wild.
was a foul until they showed the replay.
Yeah, and there were just some other really questionable calls. And like again, in full transparency, obviously we lean red, but there were some questionable calls that Brighton got, and there were definitely some questionable calls that we also got that I was like, that's not a foul either, but okay, we'll take the free kick, whatever.
Sure.
So we can talk about it later because there's obviously a much larger thing, like event in the second half that feels like we should talk about. But I just we'll just flag it really quickly for the fact that it's just like the refereeing of this game was pretty atrocious.
Yeah. I mean, I
Atrocious.
think I texted you, Sunday night, that I was seeing a lot of commentary on the socials that people thought the ref had a pretty bad game.
Yeah, and I don't think yes, it was a bad game, and I don't think Brighton fans would walk away from that feeling like they had the ref gave them a good game either. Like I think
Yeah.
it was just like legitimately a poor display of professionalism, which is just like, what are you watching the same game as any of us?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really wild. I would be curious to see what like Brighton what the Brighton internet is saying about the referee
Yeah.
too, because there were some yellow cards that they got that I think that they would also be pretty furious about. The Danny Welbeck yellow card I think was pretty wild as well, which was like maybe for misconduct or dissent. I think.
Oh, really?
3 minutes into the second half, which is like,
Okay.
what did he say? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it wasn't like, I don't know. It didn't seem like he was in his face. It was like he was running past him. I was like, okay, whatever.
Wow. Okay.
Either way, I think one thing that we should point out is like through most of the second half and basically all of the second half, anything good that happened from Liverpool transpired and was like reverberated through Alexi McAllister.
Yeah.
Like, just keep coming back to the fact that we got this guy for $35 million.
Pounds.
And, 35 million pounds, yeah. And with a couple of add-ons, I think. But still,
Yeah, still.
sub 40 million pounds. And it's just like,
For a World Cup winning starting midfielder.
yeah, it's like pretty absurd. It's like incredible. And, he's a really, really talented player. So the second goal...
I did see a replay of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it completely comes from him. It feels like, right? The play starts with McAllister finding the pass out to Szoboszlai, and Szoboszlai's pass. Wait, no, I'm sorry. It's Szoboszlai who passes it into McAllister, who finds the one touch through ball to Mo Salah, right?
Right.
Which is like
It was like a
really
lobbed
incredible.
over the defense ball, right? Or am I thinking of something
Yeah,
different?
it was like cutting through. It was like cutting through him. I think it was played on the ground, but the
Oh,
idea.
okay.
But the thing was like it was just like Szoboszlai's pass caught everybody off guard because it was kind of like cutback. It wasn't, but it was like kind of a cutback, and he hit it with such pace that it's like shot level pace. Like
Yeah.
absolutely ripped it. And then the thing is like so interesting is like that McAllister had the wherewithal and knowledge of gameplay to know that he didn't need the time to take a touch. He knew exactly where Mo Salah was. He knew exactly where the defense was, so that when he one touches it, right into Mo Salah's path is incredible.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he's
real good.
yeah. We got very lucky. We got very lucky too. I mean, we were very smart. We put in the time and work to be able to get that over the line. Okay.
Sure.
71 minutes into the second half. This is controversy, okay? Offsides call for Luis Diaz, who puts the ball in the back of the net. We've spoken about this a couple times. It's a very, very narrow offsides call. The thing that's like a little bit frustrating that I just don't understand how they're doing this. I know that there is no gray area in offsides. It's either offsides or it's not offsides. That's fine. I'm fine to understand that.
Well, so why don't you take a minute to talk about your soapbox piece about how cameras and lenses work, and then I'll respond to it there not being any gray area with something PGMO said back in August.
Yeah, okay. So basically the thing is that I've always from a very long time been frustrated with the way that they show us images from gameplay with the lines being drawn, which is that if they don't have it, and I don't think this is possible, if they might be looking at different cameras than us, the VAR officiants or referees. But they're not showing us cameras where it is impossible, just the way that the line of sight of a camera works and just the way that compression and lenses work and the way that if you are not lined up exactly in line with the person who is offsides, like the camera lens has to be right looking at them. Sorry, I knocked the microphone. There's not like you can't be off like an inch. You can't be off 6 inches. If that's the case, then the field of view changes because lenses aren't our eyes and they compress things, right? There is distortion that's happening in every lens, no matter how clean a lens is. Somebody trying to tell me there's always some level of distortion because that's how glass works. So I'm always frustrated when I'm like looking at this. I'm like, yeah, that's great that you guys are drawing straight lines, but the image isn't straight, right? Like the acquisition of where these two human beings are in the digital pixels that we're doing through a lens, it's not straight. So I just get frustrated because they're like, well, look, this straight line touches this straight line's pixel. And you're like, yeah, but they're not lined up with each other in a camera lens. So it's just that it's apples and oranges. And then the other thing, and this is like a side note, but still in camera function and stuff like that, and something that I find to be really annoying, which is like, when you are shooting a certain number of frames a second, it doesn't matter how many seconds your frames you're shooting a second. There's something that is called motion blur, which is created from the idea of single individual images replicating movement, which is like video is not actual life. You know, they're probably taking 60 frames a second for these videos so that they can play back and replay, but there's space in between those. There's 60 pictures, still frame pictures, right? And so that means that there's motion blur in athletes' movement, right? which frustrates me because how does one determine when the ball has left somebody's foot, which is the number one time to start an offsides call, when the ball will be a blur off of their foot, just period. Like, because that's the way that images are captured, unless they're shooting at a different frame rate or if they have a different shutter speed on the cameras that they are viewing as referees, which they could. I will admit that they might have a different camera setup than what we're seeing, but if
I would
they're
say
using,
based on the evidence of what we've seen so far, you'd be giving them an awful lot of credit.
yeah, and it would be a huge amount of infrastructure that they would have to invest into in a completely alternate camera system for them in every Premier League stadium in the league, in addition to broadcast camera systems, right?
Right.
If they're using broadcast camera systems, they are selling us a lie, which is that it's not a fact, because you can't tell me in the images of the still frames when the ball has left a player's foot because of how motion blur works. Because you can look at any picture of a footballer kicking the ball, right, from a broadcast camera, not like a photographer, because they're using way faster shutter speeds. But broadcast cameras, you'll look at it and the ball will be oblong and elongated, which tells me that how do you know when the moment is that it's left the player's foot, which establishes when offside starts. So we're in double trouble, which is that the lens can't actually, unless they have an algorithm to compensate for lens distortion on the angle of where they're at on the pitch, which I find hard to believe, because lens distortion would be changed on whatever the angle is that the camera is to the line of offsides. So I'm like, that's a lot of math.
All right, Howard Webb, if you're watching, let us know.
Yeah, come on, give us the details about how you guys actually do this, because it doesn't feel fair. I don't mind it being called offsides if every offsides that looks exactly like that offsides is called offsides.
Well, and so here kind of gets to my rebuttal, right? Is I saw on the Liverpool Reddit where somebody had posted a quote from like PGMOL or the Premier League back in August at the beginning of the season that said, after the 1 pixel line is drawn and the broadcast lines are put on the image, if the 2 lines overlap, it will be called onside.
And so the image that you sent the other day to me,
they are overlapping.
You're telling me that they're overlapping.
Yeah.
Right.
That's how. I mean, I mean, based on what you're saying, it doesn't feel like they've maybe consulted technical experts in how lenses and cameras and such works. But maybe they talked to somebody enough to say, hey, there actually is a little bit of gray area in how we're recording this. So maybe when it's just that close, you pick a way to make the call and you stick to it.
Yeah.
And and if they had said back in August, if they overlap, it's offside, then you know what? Fine. It's not an issue. But the fact that on Sunday they were overlapping and it was called offside after 6 months after the Premier League said, when this does happen, 8, whatever, it will be onside. And now, I was talking to Coach Brandon about this at practice today. It feels like, even as a Liverpool fan, and he admitted as a Spurs fan, that there have been some very questionable calls against Liverpool that aren't called for other teams, like the ones in Manchester or a certain red team in London.
Right.
So I don't really want to go like full tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, but like Van Dijk's goal in the League Cup and, this, and then just the blatant error of the Diaz goal in the game against Spurs at the beginning of the season. You know, it's just, what's the legal term? A preponderance of evidence or something like that?
Yeah. It just is, there's definitely a lot stacking up. Yeah, And just the fact that 50% of Liverpool games that have been lost in the Premier League have been officiated by Anthony Taylor, and like the other 30% of their losses have been officiated by
Paul Tierney.
Means that 80% of all Liverpool losses under Klopp have been under 2 referees. Like, that's kind of questionable, right? Like, just that fact.
And that's like the Paul Tompkins stats dude that I've referenced him before on the podcast, talking about how those two like get more games for Liverpool than refs officiate other games, right? Like other teams have a more even distribution of who their refs are. And these guys are officiating more than like that standard distribution for Liverpool.
Interesting. I wonder if they're also having a high... Are they also doing Man City and United and Arsenal a lot as well?
You know, I can't remember the details of the article, but like it was again focused on how it shakes out for Liverpool.
Well, either way, we've got our tinfoil hats on.
Yeah, we've gone full on conspiracy theory now.
I mean, come on, this is
builds
what
the drama,
it's about.
right?
It's about controversy.
Yeah.
Okay, so we didn't get the third goal, even though argumentatively maybe we should have, maybe we shouldn't. Is it offsides? Is it not? Are rules consistent? Whatever. We ended up playing the rest of the half. Things got a little bit dicey with 10 minutes to go. Because normally it's just how football works. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like they've got to push to try and get the second goal. They're making up yards. It's causing us to make a few mistakes. We're losing our heads a little bit. They had some really genuinely good opportunities. Kelleher sort of had maybe some missteps here and there in the last 10 minutes, but nothing clearly that was
costly,
detrimental. Yeah, exactly. It wasn't a big deal. And we ended up getting through the 6 minutes of stoppage time, and we won the game. So,
yeah.
Can't complain about that.
I guess not.
We'll take the.
I guess we might if the league is decided on goal differential.
Yeah, but we're behind like 5 or 6 goals, I think.
One at a time.
No, I know. I agree with you. I
mean, it could have been 3 or 4 after yesterday.
Right. Understood. Well, hopefully that's not the case.
Yeah.
Because, we got one chalked off from Spurs. We got one chalked off yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see. Okay, well, we've got 3 points. Liverpool's top of the league. We got 8 games to play left.
9, I think. 9.
We got 9 games to play left. We will be in Liverpool to see a game at Anfield in less than 2 weeks. In 11 days, 12 days.
Yep.
So that's going to be fun. That'll be exciting. We'll have a privilege of talking about that when we get home.
We'll try and I'm going to take a camera, so we're going to try and get some video. Maybe we can try and record a short little episode from the Airbnb that's like 4 blocks from Anfield.
Oh, that'd be incredible.
We can do like a little walking tour around the outside and record it.
Yeah, totally. I think that'd be super cool.
Try and create some content for our thousands of viewers.
We will. Let us know
in the United States that may not get the opportunity to travel to Anfield.
Yeah, let us know in the comments below if there's anything that you want to see in particular at Anfield or around Anfield. We're going to be doing the tour.
Our tickets are in the COP.
Yeah,
which I am getting really nervous since I'm taking my 8-year-old with me to his first professional sporting event, which will be in the COP.
I think he'll be fine.
We'll see what happens. Yeah, he's a good little kid. He's a tough little nugget. So
yeah,
we'll see how it goes.
Okay, guys. Well, that's about everything from us here Monday after Brighton Hove Albion is put to the sword by Liverpool. Again, it's really lovely to say Liverpool top of the league.
Top of the league.
9 games left until we sew up Klopp's tenure. Will we be leaving with the Premier League title and silverware in hand? We will see. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, give us all the comments in the world. We'll talk to you soon. Cheers.
Cheers.